You're live.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome. You are here locked on to Keep Six Empowerment to Unlock the Justice System. Tonight, we're going to be talking about increasing community mental health supports. We're going to also touch base on a bit on what trauma is, what mental health is, and how does it affect mental health and the lack of mental health supports within the justice system. Also, we're going to touch base on how the community can better support those who are struggling with mental health issues. We are here live, locked on, and streaming on Facebook as well as YouTube. I'm your host, Natacha Pennycooke. I'm a registered psychotherapist. I am the mental health advisor for Keep Six. I'm also the vice president of the Association of Black Psychologists Toronto chapter, and I am the owner and operator of Natacha Pennycooke Psychotherapy Services, where I provide psychotherapy, speaking engagements, and clinical consultation with those who are struggling from self-doubt, with trauma, anxiety, and depression to help them to live a better life and to heal and to thrive. In September, Keep Six hosted an Empowerment to Unlock the Justice System, where I hosted talking about trauma, talking about mental health, and talking about the criminal justice system. To date, we have had over 2,000 individuals who watched that episode. And today, this evening, we are going to continue the conversation on mental health, really focusing on the community, on community supports. And our panelists tonight are going to be talking to you about their experiences as well as what they are doing in the community. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Richard. You're on mute, Richard. Go ahead. You're still on mute. There you go.
Okay, there
you got it.
Anyways, my name is Richard Atkinson. I'm from Alexander Park Atkinson Co-op, named after my father in the downtown core of Toronto. I run a ceramic pottery program and a Flip Your Switch podcast out of that same location right now to help the kids in the community. Been doing it for 5 years on my own hook, giving back. Was living in Vancouver for a few years before I came back to Toronto 5 or 6 years ago. Spent 32 years in the penitentiary, had a gang profile in the police museum from the downtown core. I'm an author, wrote a book about that gang called The Dirty Tricks Gang. And I come basically from the largest multiracial family in Canada. I had 16 aunts and uncles and 65 first cousins in that same neighborhood when I was growing up as a kid. So the neighborhood was primarily us, Black Canadians, and we call ourselves Afro-Métis because we're mixed with natives. So we always looked at ourselves as half breeds, as we called ourselves when we were younger and all that kind of stuff. But now we use Afro-Métis because it seems to sum up the variety of races that exist within us. And I don't know what else to say beyond that.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Asante, go ahead. You're next. Introduce yourself.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Asante Haughton. I'm a mental health advocate. I wear a lot of different hats within the industry. I've done a couple TEDx talks. I won a big, what they call the CAMH 150 Awards. So selected as one of the top 150 mental health influencers in the country. I'm just giving you the resume. But it's not really that important for me, but it's part of the process. I work at a youth mental health organization called Stella's Place. Through Stella's Place, I partnered with the city to help run a program called the Community Healing Project, which is all about bringing mental health literacy and community supports, mental health supports to a community. I host a web show called Cypher. I co-founded an advocacy organization called Reach Out Response Network, and what we're doing right now in Toronto is really trying to lobby for non-police-led crisis reform. Is there anything else? That's all that comes to the top of mind right now. So I'll leave it right there. Keep myself busy. Otherwise, I get bored. I don't know how to focus my energy. So I'm just happy to be here with all of y'all tonight.
Thank you, Asante. Latoya, I'll let you go next. You're on mute. There you go. You're good. You're good.
I'm
Latoya.
good.
Yeah, you're
How
good.
do y'all doing?
Good.
How y'all doing? You can hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi,
Welcome.
my name's Latoya Jane. My name's Latoya Jane. I used to be a gang leader in the Jane Finch area for a girl chapter named Lunettes of the Looney Tunes. Changed my life, became a social worker. I worked for Toronto Community Housing for 10 years. Then I co-founded an organization, got $3.5 million from United Way, Redemption Reintegration Services. Then I became a recording international artist right now, and I'm still working in the community, but I mostly do my music. So I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Latoya. Roberto, you're up next.
Hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you. Go for it.
Well, I don't know. I don't have as big a resume as everybody here, but like the past person, I'm also a recording artist. Got a few videos out there. I've also been in trouble in my life. I've also been in prison and spent some time involved with gangs and all the good stuff you can think about. But I've changed my life. I try to help in the community as much as I can. Right now, recording a song with a cancer survivor whose mother called me and asked me to help the kid's dream come true. She wanted to record with an artist, so now we have that song coming up. So I don't know what else to tell you guys.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Nzappa, you're next.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
awesome. So with like other individuals, when I was younger, didn't make the best decisions in my life. And that put me on the path with knowing the law and wanting to give back to the community. And so for the last 20 odd years, I've been a youth and community worker. I currently host my own radio show. I'm actually a history teacher as well, History's Mirror at thatchannel.com. And yeah, I'm a big advocate for mental health and for youth specifically when it comes to those who are residing in the city.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. And Kevin?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Is everything good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Kevin Haynes. I'm a registered social worker. I work at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, or also known as CAMH. I also wear various other hats, but for today's purposes, I'd say I'm mainly here in that capacity. And I work in a specific program called the Substance Abuse Program for African Canadian or Caribbean Youth, or SAPACY. So I specifically work with youth who identify as African, Canadian, Caribbean, anything in between, and we provide psychotherapy, access to psychiatry, and advocacy support for youth who are struggling with mental health and or addictions issues. So happy to be here. Thanks everyone for joining as well.
Thanks. Thank you. So, Richard, I want to start with you because you have such a long history. And if anyone were to Google you, there's lots of stuff. I watched YouTube videos. I went over your podcast, so many interviews. There was one article that I found that stated that for decades, you were a member of Toronto's Dirty Tricks gang, and you reported that you spent over 33 years in prisons across Canada. Can you briefly tell us how you became involved in the gangs and that led up to your incarceration?
Well, I came from a marginalized neighborhood in the downtown core of Toronto. It was at the time the most multiracial neighborhood in Canada and probably most multiracial neighborhood in the world. It had in that neighborhood, west end of Toronto, different than the east end of Toronto. There's just more racial matrices, Italian, Portuguese, German, Jamaican affluences all around us. West Indian affluence, I wouldn't say just Jamaica, because in 1967, the Immigration Act changed and opened the doors for more people of color to come in the country. And 2,000 of them settled into the Alexander Park area or the Spadina and Dundas area. And the other 2,000 went to the NDG area of Montreal. And that changed the racial matrix of our neighborhood and led to racial tension also, because there was more people to lend a voice to any racial anomalies that they seen or what was beyond normal at the time from the police or from the community. So my gang was a part and parcel, because I come from the most incarcerated family in Canadian history. I believe there's one of us in every prison I've ever been in, and there's 5 or 6 of us in every prison in Ontario as I speak right now. I had an uncle hung in 1935. He was illiterate, and they said he was a little slow, suffering some mental issues. And he apparently signed a statement he couldn't read, and that led to his execution from this government. And I had 2 cousins that were executed in 1949. They robbed a taxi driver, hit him in the head with a hammer. Unfortunately, that the taxi driver died. The backstory to that is those days, if you didn't have enough money to get your kid out of the hospital when he was born, they generally gave your kid to the Children's Aid Society, and newborn babies were sold off pretty easily. So you stood the chance of losing your kid if you didn't have $80 or $100 to pay that medical fee to get your baby out of the hospital. And that's what they did. And anyways, they lost their lives doing it. And so that would be the long-term trauma in my family that you mentioned in one of your questions there. But how that led to criminality is that anything that fell off the white man's truck when we were younger, it tended to belong to us, and we just split it up. We looked at it, they lost it, too bad for them. And we put it up for all those years of slavery that we participated in. They owe us something. And then the natives in us would also say that stealing our land and stealing our natural resources, at least they can give a little back if it felt. That was the justification for that. And I think that led to a certain coalescing of like-minded people within our community that formed a juvenile gang. I was arrested at 10 years old. I had shot at a cop when I was 14 and was arrested then and put in training school, sent to maximum security training school. And while I was in training school, I was indoctrinated to all the best-selling books at the time: Eldridge Cleaver, Huey P. Newton, Malcolm X, all the black radical stuff. So when I came out of training school at late 15, early 16, I could spew that stuff. I could rap the rap. I could talk the talk, and I could also stand behind my weapon if needed be. So that created in us a different gang, and the RCMP noted that, and that gang was different than we'll say the criminal gangs that were emerging, the juvenile delinquent gangs and the young adult gangs that were emerging around the downtown core at the time. We were a little delinquent, but we were also political, and that made us different. So we were political enough that we picked up arms. We weren't using the arms or threatening anyone with the arms. We were just amassing them. And we thought the revolution was coming, as people do now. We were getting ready then. So there's a similarity between then and now. So then I joined the Black Panther Party under the aegis of Warren Hart, who came to Toronto unknown to us and the rest of the community. He was a NASA agent from the United States. So he was an undercover agent, and he was really a crooked agent. So what he done is he came here under the aegis of finding and ratting out black radical groups, but there were real none at the time, except for small skirmishes that happened in various universities. But there was no real big thing happening like in the United States. So what he did is he found us, this younger generation of black, angry youth, and he pulled us into the Black Panther Party, criminalized us, and then ratted us out to the government and sent us to prison. So while I was in prison, I was still writing him, still communicating with him, still believing in the power of the movement. And then an article came out, a McDonald Commission article, and him ratting the government out about all the stuff he did for the United States Security Agency on loan to Canada. Well, that triggered in me a different kind of response, because then I knew I was the same as the political prisoners that I read about in the books. I was the same as Malcolm X. I was the same as Eldridge Cleaver, Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton. So then I could act out similarly. So when I was released, I attempted for a second to go to Montreal and focus on boxing, because I come from a professional boxing family, the largest boxing family in Canada. And I figured I'll go that route. Maybe I could save myself from the anger that was within me. Didn't work out, went back to Toronto and started the Dirty Tricks gang. And we began robbing banks then, using the techniques that this NASA agent taught us to perpetrate the crimes we did. We robbed over 100 banks in the downtown core of Toronto. And we did, we call ourselves rounders. We stole anything we could steal. We hustled any hustle we could hustle. We did everything we could do not to be called a square John, not to be called one of them. Part of that we'll say Bay Street society We wanted to be different than the Bay Street Society. So then there was no interventions that could help us. There was no one to say, if you behave yourself, you could be a lawyer, which I wanted to be, and then work on Bay Street. You could be a businessman and work on Bay Street. You can be a social elite and be on Bay Street. That wasn't in our peripheral. Our peripheral was just banging it out, making money until we died. And we all thought we would die early. We all said that. We all said we would die in our 20s. None of us thought we would live into our 30s. Our gang took on a different persona because we were both suicidal and homicidal and moving around the city at the time. We didn't give a shit. So I write that in my book that I had a beef with some other organized crime types. And we were stepping on a lot of toes then. And I had a meeting and I said, listen, there's 10 of us. All of us just got out of Millhaven. None of us have kids. And all of us will throw down until we can't throw down anymore. What do you guys want to do? So then they said, because they're older business guys, more entrenched, they have to turn a key in their business every day. We didn't have to do that. Our business was just moving around similarly to the kids that are being arrested now. 88 of them yesterday and 100 a couple of weeks ago. So those gangs are similar, just a little bigger than ours. And they have the ability to move around when we can only move around within the Black community, which was smaller then. It was either here in the downtown core of Toronto or in Montreal in the indigene area. Now you got Black communities spread out across the province, giving a more impetus to hide if you commit some nasty deed. So that makes those criminals out now more brazen because they figure they can get away with more stuff.
Right, right, yeah. And it's interesting because Latoya, you have a couple of interviews online as well, and you also mentioned how growing up in the Jane and Finch area was really not rough for you, and how you got in some trouble, right? And similarly to Richard telling his story, can you tell us a bit about your childhood experiences growing up in Jane and Finch? What you can speak, and you're on mute, Latoya. You're on mute. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry.
That's all right.
You can hear me. Growing up in Jane and Finch was very rough. You know what? It still didn't really change because I was shooting a documentary the other day and I went over there and they still have no bars. So one year they just decided to take the bars so nobody can't sit in front of their house. Like you had to grow up like that. There was no parks growing up. So like seeing shootings and stuff like that was just normal in Jane and Finch because to me the police were like scared to come in there because of how strong it was, and it was poverty, I remember how poor we were. I remember how much my mom used to pay rent, $3.95 to housing. I remember the roaches. No matter how much we cleaned our house, I remember the roaches. I remember we used to wake up with roaches in our food. Sometimes we ate roaches by accident. So it was just the lowest level of poverty, and there wasn't really resources like how there is now, like how there's programming for youths and programming for young mothers and stuff like that. And I feel like if they had that back then, it would have been a little bit different.
Yeah,
but it was rough.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Asante, I want to go to you because you, in your TED Talk, you also talk about what it was like growing up. Can you share a little bit of that with us? Thank you, Latoya.
Yeah, 100%. Latoya, you're saying really resonates with me. I mean, I'm not from Jane and Finch, but from downtown. What used to be called Donmar Court, right outside Regent Park. But anyway, I mean, the stories you tell of the poverty definitely resonates with me, especially with the roaches. I mean, that was how it was. So we're really poor, right? And and with that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of temptation around you, and so hearing all your stories, sometimes I'm like, how did I not get caught up in all of that? And I think for me, a lot of it was just at a young age, I had an uncle that was murdered when I was like 7 years old. So for me, it was like I saw the consequences of that lifestyle, and it was very, seeing my mom deal with that and have to fly back to Jamaica to bury the body and all these different things. It just really left a mark on me to try my hardest to essentially stay safe, and stay on the right path. I mean, not to say I always was on that path, but mostly, you know what I mean. But you know, there's always the anxiety of what was going on in your neighborhood. There's always the anxiety of, you know, who are the OGs on the block, and but also, the police and the undercovers, and those who had addictions, and those who are homeless, and what they would do to feed themselves. And so that was all circling around me all the time on the outside, but on the inside it was also like I didn't have, my father wasn't really in my life, and my mom was working so much that I pretty much didn't see her at all from like the age of 10 to like the age of 13, because she was always at work or at school or doing something. And my brother is a lot older than me, so I just kind of found myself really fending for myself a lot, which put me in a situation where, I didn't really have any mentorship. So I was really just trying to figure it all out on my own, and making a lot of mistakes, obviously, but also not really, when you don't have the mentorship, you don't really have folks that can help teach you how to manage situations in life, um, especially, how you experience life. It wasn't like, I go to school and something will happen, and I didn't have no one to sit me down and explain and give me the context, or something would happen in the street. I didn't have no one to sit me down and give me the context. It was all just very confusing, uh, for me. So it was really challenging, I think, for me, just growing up in the circumstances in the way that I did. Um, and I think I was lucky in the respect that I was one of those kids who didn't have to work hard to get good grades. So I just kind of showed up, and there was 90s all over the place, and I wasn't really paying attention. And it was just I just showed up, and I did the work, and and so that gave me a lot of privilege, within the school, especially when they always want to put one of the black kids forward as like the exception or the mascot, right? And when you're a kid, you don't really understand that that's how they perceive you. You're just enjoying the fruits of what those benefits, right? So for me, I was like, yeah, cool. You're gonna pay for me to send me on a trip. You're gonna pay for me to send me on a leadership camp. I'm gonna take that. But as I got older, I started to really reflect on how I could use that position to, help my peers. And, to the extent, I almost staged a walkout in grade 12 because of, just unjustified suspensions and things like that. Um, so, I mean, for me, it was a cacophony of challenges in my life, but also just lucky enough to have some people out there who were supporting me, who were external from my family, but definitely did a lot to help keep me afloat.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Roberto, I want to go to you because you shared recently on YouTube your story. And in your story, you spoke about your childhood, and Asante spoke about Latoya, you're back, right? Asante was speaking about how not seeing his mother. You also share in your story a bit about your mom and growing up. Can you share that with us today?
Well, yeah. My mother was originally a Trinidadian, and my grandmother was involved in the gold rush in the '60s within like Trinidad, Venezuela, Colombia, all those places that had high grade gold. My grandma was like, let's say, the Escobar of gold of that time, right? She was trafficking back and forth, and she had 8 kids of her own, and she had enough money to send every kid to whatever country they wanted to go to private schools. My mother chose Spain to be one. So she was in Spain for 3, 4 years. But when it was time to come back home to Trinidad, um, she had no degree and she had this fatherless child. So she decided to stop in Venezuela at a church and leave me there. So I went through the system for a little bit. A short time after my grandma, her mother, had discovered that, her daughter had given birth, she had a child. So she moved my mother back to Venezuela. She fought through the system and the people that had me. So I bounced back and forth. Now, if you listen to the song or understand the song I released, there's a part where I say that I'm grateful that you're gone because of the fact that being with her was a lot more torture than not being with her. When I was with her, she took out that frustration that her mother forced her to come be a mother when she felt like she already got rid of that burden. So I was treated in ways that a child shouldn't be treated. So that was my situation with that. I don't know what I can say furthermore on it.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Nzappa Zapp, you talk when we spoke, you spoke a lot about your involvement with youth, and I know that you are a youth shelter worker. Can you tell us about some of the experiences, I guess some of the stories that you have heard of the youth that you work with as it relates to, right? We have some individuals who've spoken about their youth. What is it that you're seeing nowadays with the youth, especially in the shelter system?
I would say that it's more common mental health issues, and than that's been previously perceived. Substance abuse, mental health, pretty much on a day-to-day basis, it's hand in hand from what we see, and just the effects that some of the youth go through in terms of self-medicating because they don't want to take the medication that they're prescribed, or how they deal with their peers who seem to have a form of mental illness in terms of a hierarchy and ranking themselves inside the residence. There's a lot of things that go on that staff really try to be part of to be a resource and to be able to assist them in any way that we can. However, when you see that they understand it's a system, and they also understand that when society in general, from what a lot of my peers would, I would agree with this, that society already likes to blame youth in general for everything. And there's not a lot of resources that are put out towards youth in general. However, when you put on if you look through the lens of homelessness with youth, it just becomes more and more of a tragedy for a lot of these youth. And a lot of them get involved in because they have mental illnesses, they get abused by other peers, prostitution. There's cases that we see where forced narcotic use is made so they become customers for other youth. It's just all over the spectrum. So there's kind of hard. I would say this: it's almost hard to say what I have not seen, specifically dealing with youth shelters.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because everyone who shared their stories this evening, it just speaks to how these experiences that have been your realities, how it can very much lead to having a mental health issue, right? I mean, we know that a lot of the things that happen in our life that sets up the foundation, but then how is that system set? How is that foundation set up for us to be able to go forward? How is that set up for us to be able to take care of ourselves and so on and so forth? And it really does have a large impact on our mental health, as everyone has spoken about this evening. So, Kevin, I want to get to you because you work at CAMH and you work at SAPAC. Can you tell us about SAPAC? I don't think a lot of people actually know about the program. So, can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So SAPAC is a program specifically for Black youth, African Canadian, Caribbean youth. It focuses on mental health and addiction. So when I say youth, I know sometimes we have various different definitions of what encompasses youth. There was a period of time that we were going up to seeing up to 29 years of age. And there's lots more flexibility for younger youth as well. Now we're somewhere between that 24 to 29 range, like on an exception basis, given the fact that we understand many factors impede Black youth from accessing services sometimes earlier, where we kind of get to that age where they're kind of what we would call transitional age youth, where there's not as many services available They're starting to age out of a lot of systems, and they're kind of caught in that place where they're too young for this program, but too old for that program, right? So we're trying to bridge that gap in that way. But in terms of what we provide on an individual level, so it's psychotherapy or counseling, goal-based, and it's based on harm reduction. So what I mean by that is we start with the youth and where they're at, and whatever their goals are, we try to work towards that. So a lot of the youth I work with, for example, come from various parts of the system, but just to kind of tie back into this, I work with a great number of youth who have involvement with whether the youth justice system or the criminal justice system when they're adults. And sorry, I'm just reading the comments. I forgot you said things were going to pop up.
No, you're good. Someone is
do?
saying this
Did
is
I
a
push
great
something?
talk, that
Okay.
it's very much needed. So you guys are doing a great job. Keep going, Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that a lot of the youth that I work with are coming from the justice system. Not all, but there's a good portion worth mentioning as well. And I want to mention that because when I talk about goals-based, a lot of youth come because they're mandated to come, whether it was a condition of, probation or a condition of the family. And I think historically, a lot of programs would kind of look at youth coming in this capacity, and when you engage with them, they're maybe not the most excited to be talking with you, right? There's lots of mistrust in the system. And I feel a lot of programs would say, you know what, this person doesn't want to be here. They're not appropriate for this service, or, we need to find them somewhere else, right? But us kind of looking from a different lens would kind of look at it and say, it's my role to support this youth by seeing the value of what they can get out of this program, right? So if they're not ready to maybe engage now, that's where my work has to focus before we can even get into the, the deeper things in terms of trauma and that sort of thing. I first have to let them build that trust with me and the system, so that we can delve into those things when they're able to, right? So I think that's a big piece. But when we talk about mistrust of the system, I have youth who don't even want to come to my office. So understandably so, right? They might know someone who's been to the hospital, who's been, had an involuntary admission. They think you're working with the police, they what have you, right? They've talked to someone before, and Children's Aid was called, right? And there's just all this mistrust and not feeling like they can talk to people about what they're struggling with without having to worry about getting into more trouble, right? So a lot of times I actually go into the community and I see people where they're comfortable. So I go to a lot of schools throughout various parts of the city, and I find myself lots of times in certain secondary schools in the Jane and Finch community, in the East End as well, and trying to really build partnerships with the school staff, so to be able to run, informal mental health groups at lunchtime, where the students are able to come and kind of break down some of those barriers and that stigma about what mental health is and where they can go to access services. So that's kind of in a general overview. There's lots of various community engagement and things like that we're involved with, and advocacy that I'm sure we'll get to at certain other parts in this talk. But that's kind of in terms of a general overview of the work that we do through SAPC.
Nice, and thank you for that. And I think it's really important to have you on this talk tonight, because CAMH, while I think it's the largest mental health and addiction hospital in Canada, but it also sometimes has a really bad rap, right? Like, people who look like us on this panel don't want to go there because there has been known to be a lot of different issues in terms of racism, in terms of systemic racism, in terms of criminalization. And it's interesting because, as you've said, you go into the communities to be able to reach people where they're at. And that is so important, because there are a lot of stigmas around going into the hospital, because unfortunately, mental health is still very stigmatized, and mental health is very criminalized. So by you going into the community to reach people where they're at, it helps people know that these services are there, these services are accessible, and these services are meant to be able to help. Can you tell us, Kevin, a little bit, how do youth gain access to these programs, specifically SAPC program?
So in terms of through CAMH, there's many, I guess, methods of getting connected. So there's the general phone number to call, which is called Access CAMH, where any client of CAMH can just call that number, and there's like a telephone screener. They don't work for SAPC, but they work for CAMH as a larger organization. And through that screening process, they ask, demographic questions, but through that process, they should be filtered into if they identify as being African Canadian or Caribbean and they're in the age bracket, they should be offered SAPC as an option for service. And I think overwhelmingly so, as I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to hear, a lot of the youth opt to take that for various reasons that I think kind of brought all of us here. Just that trust, that level of trust, seeing a person that they identify with. And it doesn't mean they trust you right off the bat. I remember there was one youth I was working with, a certain school had been working to refer them to me. And I had been calling and trying to, leave messages and that sort of thing, and not really making any traction in terms of connecting them with that service. So I told the school guidance counselor that I would just come to the school to meet them because maybe that would help. And when I got there, and they're, this is Kevin, the person to meet you. And the youth looked at me and they said, "Oh, you're the black guy. Why didn't you just say that?" Right. So I think that kind of stuck with me for a while, because I think just that sense of trust, knowing that it's someone that they identify with.
Yes.
Immediately, they're more comfortable talking to me and sharing, okay, this is what I'm going through. And of course, there's still parameters in terms of, confidentiality and limits and that sort of thing. But just being able to see someone say, okay, maybe I can trust this person, right? Or maybe I might be a little bit more comfortable being vulnerable with this person. So anyone can self-refer through the phone. There's also a referral form that if, a support person, a teacher, a youth worker, a shelter worker, if they wanted to help connect someone, they could either call with them or they could fill out that form and have it faxed over. I always say to people, if you're having difficulty, just call me and I'll help you figure it out. Because it's not so much about how, it's about someone needs help, right? So let's figure out how to connect them.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you mention that, Kevin, because people need to know that you can self-refer to this program. You don't have to have your family doctor. You don't have to have a social worker. You don't have to have a school guidance counselor. You can self-refer to this program. There's a question for you, Kevin. It says, Kevin, do you get the opportunity to support youth that have been incarcerated and continue to battle with mental health issues? In youth custody, they are literally traumatized. So Tafiq, can you put that question up? It's a question from right here on YouTube by Norma. There you go. Thank you. So Kevin, the question is for you. Yes,
so
please,
my answer
Kevin.
would be yes. I literally have been into the youth custody facilities to provide therapy for some youth that I've been involved with. Even made arrangements to have them brought to my office for an hour break during their sentence, and then brought back weekly just so they can still have access not only to me but to psychiatry as well. I am in touch with a lot of youth court workers who sometimes, through building those relationships, as they see youth come into the system, they'll send me a quick call or text, say, "Hey, Kevin, I have someone if we can connect with," and trying to help them connect with that. I've literally gone to court with youth, been on the stand to try to help advocate for, more appropriate sentencing that incorporates, mental health aspects and treatment based. So yes, in various capacities, a lot of youth in the system, sometimes at, Toronto South, they'll have older youth who they'll say, "Hey, Kevin, I have someone who's going to be released from custody. Can they connect with you after the release so they can work on A, B, and C goals?" So we definitely have partnerships through other programs like that help to support youth who are in custody and trying to turn a leaf in their life.
Nice, thank you. And it's interesting how you spoke about that representation. I remember when I was working at a CHC in the Toronto area, I had a client. It was going to be the first time that we met. And I remember walking out to the waiting room, and literally the client looked at me and their face was, "Oh my God, thank you. You are a Black woman. I can talk to you." Right? So that representation is so important, especially when it comes to mental health, because trust is such a key factor. Such a key factor. Richard, I want to come to you because when you and I spoke, you were telling me about your I guess the challenges around requesting mental health services on the different occasions when you were inside, when you were incarcerated, as well as on parole. Can you tell us about those experiences trying to seek mental health services within the criminal justice system?
Well, less so inside. Inside, it's trying to get the programming that it takes in order for them to lower your security levels so you can transition down the different levels of security to get back out. And that's really hard to do. So in my case, they said no programs fit me within the CSC, within correctional service, because of my type of organized criminality. And I believe that they couldn't deal with my case because my case had a black component to it. It was a racial component to my gang, and they didn't know how to deal with that. They also did a study recently, spent $15 million on a one-year study on black youth gangs and adult black gangs, and they come up with, we don't know what to do. So I think I fell in that category where they just didn't know to help me. So I had a woman that visited me for 12 years. In the 32 years that I spent in jail, I've always had a woman visiting me in some capacity. So one had visited me for 13 straight years. I got out, and within the year that I got out, she was diagnosed with cancer and had died when I was in Vancouver. So I was under a lot of parole stress in Vancouver. I'm under a unique sentence, Bill C-57, it's called. It's a unique parole sentence. And I'm the only guy, I think, in Canada. It's really restrictive is the best way to put it. So I transferred back to Toronto, where my family is from, to go back to Alexander Park, where my mother and my relatives still lived, and a lot of opposition to that. I was told to stay out of that neighborhood because we don't believe you're in that neighborhood to help those people. We think you're in that neighborhood to take names and numbers to start a new gang. And I'm like, I don't think my mother wants to be in my gang. She's from that neighborhood, you know. So that's the kind of opposition I was at. So I asked to see a psychologist. So they said, well, you're part, and I said, I wanted to see specifically a psychologist like you, Natacha, someone who wasn't white. And they said, well, you're part Native. Why don't you try the Native aspects? So I went to them and said my case. They said, we couldn't help you. And they referred me to the Native Mental Health or Native Health Services on Queen and Sherbourne. Went there and they couldn't help me. So when I said I need help specifically, I want to talk to a psychologist. A white woman came out and I said, no, you're not going to do. So I let that slide. And then this year, too many changes in my parole officers. They changed them repeatedly because of the nature of my sentence and the judge's comments that said I manipulate the parole board pretty successfully. And so they changed them up on me. So I'm a new parole officer, a new white woman in my face, seemingly every 6 to 8 months. And that was bothering me. So I asked for help in that area. And it was just like, we really don't know how to help you. It's all in your head. Do something about it. Why do you keep thinking of the past? And I'm like, it's all past based, what I'm talking about. So anyways, that fell through and I have no help to this day. So I spent 32 years in prison. I've shot it out with the man. I've even played Russian roulette. I've danced on razor blades a long time, and I've never had mental intervention of any kind in all the years. So I was seeking it, and it was denied me. So that's the position I'm in now. And so I have my art, I have my music. I'm a musician, I'm an artist, and I'm a professional fighter. So I'm a coach, a boxing coach. So while in prison, all those 32 years, that's what I did to save myself from the insanity of prison. So I still do that now. That's exactly what I do now. But it in itself is not so fulfilling as it in itself was while I was doing time. And I still feel I am doing time on parole, and I feel that I'm doing more time than I should. There's this pressure on me. Primarily, and I understand it, I was Black Panther, and I was a card-carrying, gun-holding Black Panther member at the time. So I get their fear and their angst of what could and might happen, especially in today's unstable political environment. But I've come a long way from my criminality, and that's the thing. So historically, I tend to rob banks. That's what I do. So usually within 18 months of me being released, I start robbing banks again, and I got a crew, and I pull them around me, and we just roll that way. So I haven't committed any crimes now in almost 30 years. I've been out 10 years now, and I still don't feel free, and I don't feel. Yeah, it's a weird feeling because everyone says that's freedom is a state of mind, and I get that, but I got this continuous pressure on me from primarily white people that work for the government. And they always say, why are you so paranoid? And I say, because I was set up by the government twice, once with Warren Hart and once with the RCMP and the taking over the country of St. Kitts with a criminal organization that eventually led to my 50-year sentence that I'm doing now. So, yeah. So I'm not that trusting of the system. It's never helped me, and I'm not that trusting of it. And I've witnessed it from the inside for a long time. So there was a United Nations plea from Jamaica. This was about 20 years ago, and they were begging Canada the United States and England to stop deporting back to Jamaica the psychopaths that they produce. And their prime minister made a really good point. He says, we send you babies to these countries, nice innocent little babies, and you send us back killing psychopaths. So how does that come about? We don't want your psychopath. Keep them for yourself. But the law says when you're deportable, you're going to get deported. So, and that's the sense. So our system creates this. The system of justice creates it, but our system generally creates this within us. So our communities are filled with people with mental health issues with guns in their hands, just like me, just like I was,
Yeah. And it's interesting, because when we spoke, and you just mentioned it, just as you just spoke just now, you've been literally looking for culturally appropriate mental health services for the last 30 plus years. Exactly. And you have not been able to find it. And not only being able to find it, but you have been requesting within the criminal justice system, with the CSC, with your parole officers for help. I mean, and you even mentioned to me up to, I think you had mentioned it was February, March, where you again put in a request. That's and right. You were not given any help, right? So this is such a problem that.
And I was just to add to that, sorry to cut you off, Natasha. Just maybe 2 months ago, I was called into the office because they said I was harassing my parole officer with too much political questions, and she threatened me with a risk assessment. She said, "I think you need a risk assessment," which then declassifies you. You got to go back in to get reclassified. And I'm like, so I'm looking at her, and I had to challenge her. I says, "What do you know about mental health initiatives? It's not your area of expertise." And she backed up.
Right.
So
right.
I was even threatened as I was trying to ask for help.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because it goes back to the criminalization of mental health.
Exactly.
Right? Which is so problematic. Richard, there's a question for you. Tafiq, can you put that question up? It's from Janelle. So Richard says this question is for Richard. What coping strategies did you use to help you so you didn't develop a mental health disorder?
Well, how do you know I don't have one? The first thing I would say, I don't know. I haven't been diagnosed. I don't know. So the coping strategies I used were the strategies imprinted in me from the literature I read on Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, and Huey P. Newton and the like. Eldridge Cleaver had the biggest impact on me because his regimen in his book, how he survived San Quentin prison, was the exact regimen I used to survive my prison and the incarceration up here. So those individuals, those leaders of the Black community in the late 60s, they were my teachers and my mentors on how to do the time I knew I would be doing. I didn't expect to be doing 6 months and get out. I expected to be doing life in prison eventually. And I wrote in my book that when I first went to prison, I wasn't a lifer, and I wrote on my entry card, lifer. And the guys actually got mad at me, the other criminals. What do you want to write that shit for on your card? You're not a lifer. Only idiots do life. They can't get away with murder. Those were the exact words they said to me, because then the prison was a true school of crime. And you went to the university to get taught. And that's what happened. So there's another answer to that question. While in the prison, I used it as a university to teach myself more and better crime. And that helped me with my mental illness, I think, or the propensity to become mentally ill. I focused my energy on overthrowing the system and trying to cause as much destruction as I could while I was there.
Thank you for that, Richard. Latoya, I want to go to you now because you speak about your experiences being incarcerated as experiences that ultimately saved you, right? Can you speak about that? Latoya, you're there?
I wanted to say.
Okay, there.
Richard, I want to buy your book.
Yeah, it's readily available.
Can you hear me now?
On Amazon. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I want to read about you before I go to my bed, Richard. Straight up.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Your story is interesting, man. And it also brought me back though to my incarceration experience. So to be honest with you, my first prison was school because I was suspended 26 times. I was at 16 different schools. I was expelled in grade 3 after getting suspended for my 10th time. So how was I supposed to learn properly? You know what I'm saying? Like at the time, my father was well known for being arrested on a high takedown. It was on the front page of the paper. What they did was they used to like kind of, my mom became just, I don't like the word single mom, but she alone was like raising us 6. So they kind of toyed with her. And there wasn't really supports for mothers back in the day because I just raised my 24-year-old son and I teamed up with the teachers and stuff like that. But my mom by herself, she didn't know really how to like, do it the right way. Like she would more cuss and stuff. You know what I mean? Like when they would get her mad. But I see how they set us up, me and my brother, because my brother was suspended and expelled double me. So if I was suspended 26 times, my brother was suspended about 60 odd times. And to me, that was all unnecessary because, of course, that was going to form us to go to jail. You know what I'm saying? I had my son and I still went to jail because I was a gang leader. And to be honest, the schools kind of turned my mom off of me and my family. That's where they first started to say I was bad. And like they just always used to put me down and like they made me believe that. But the streets glorified me for being bad. So I took on to the streets.
Right. Yeah.
Which obviously wasn't the smartest thing to do because the streets isn't real. It's all a facade of how things are joined. Richard, you can't say, are you still friends with those guys? Like everything is just, I don't know. Anyways, I went to prison and you just made me remember some things in there because I went through the experience of like, I used to be there for the woman because I was always a singer. That's where I started singing in jail, to be honest. The guards discovered me. And like, there was also some haters though, like the superintendent, like he dislocated my arm because I used to entertain the women and make them feel comfortable. Then they made me sit in the hole for 3 months. I did almost 2 years straight, but they made me sit in the hole for 3 months just because they could. And like then I started to sing for the man them down there, but it still messed with me because I had to learn how to talk to myself. I had to learn how to like read the Bible and just entertain myself with the voices in my head. Not to say that I heard multiple voices in my head, but you know what I'm saying? Like picture yourself sitting on a like mattress that's this thin, like and you only have the newspaper to read and the Bible. Like you don't know you're gonna want to be forced to like read other stuff, you know what I'm saying? But at the time, I'll always remember this man, Mr. Serpa. He was a superintendent at Hamilton Jail. I went to 4 different jails in that jail stay. I was the last batch of women at the Vanier Center in Brampton, and I was the first batch of women in the super jail in Maplehurst. So he came one day in the hole in Hamilton, and he said, "Rodney, how long were you there?" Here, and I asked him the date because I didn't even know. And then when he told me, I said 3 months, and he said, "Yo, we're shipping you to the West." And when he shipped me to the West, the girls donated the TV to me because they were so shocked that they didn't know when they were unbraiding my hair that it was my hair. They thought it was braids. I didn't even really bathe in the hole. Like it messed with me mentally, obviously, because you know what I'm saying? Like I got showers. I was in the 3 months. I probably showered like 15 times max. I'm down there with like some different people, but they're all males. I was the only female. And I think the worst part was them trying to make me look like an animal after they were trying to make me an animal because there was tours and the youths came to tour the jails and like they'd be like, "So why is she down here?" And they'd be like, "Oh, because she and the thing is, even how they put me in the hole, it was just so weird because they left a male on the ramp and I was on the ramp and a male touched me. And they knew they would have gotten in trouble, so they just threw me in the hole. So it's just crazy. But I'm not gonna lie to you, don't get it twisted. All those things built me to be who I am today. Eh? I'm not gonna lie to you. I was a little unruly girl. Like I used to think that I was a man. So I feel like that discipline was kind of needed, but not necessarily the dislocating my arm, the kicking me in my face, and the lockdowns and having the girls have to riot for me and stuff like that. And then like it just made me more angry when I came out because I already had stuff. My brother got shot before he got shot and died. He got shot when I was in there. So I was just already out of it. You know what I'm saying? Then when I came out, my next brother got shot 18 times. So I didn't really heal properly. I'm not gonna lie to you. I upgraded from knives to straps. And because I kept getting glorified and glorified and glorified as creature, do I look like a creature to you? I don't even know how I could answer. I definitely had a different spirit in me, but I'll say, and I don't care, because I could even remember my principal kicking me. I'll say my aggression started in school. That's where my aggression started, in the Catholic schools that I went to. That's why I speak in schools now. And I try to like help youths to express themselves because I know what it's like. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but yeah.
No. Thank you for that. I can't even imagine what it was like for you to go back and tell that story after hearing Richard's story, right? And it's interesting because you mentioned how for you it started in school, and you're right. There is well known the school to prison pipeline, and exactly what you mentioned is the is that bridge in that pipeline, right? How it's
Yeah, they definitely said, sorry, one more thing. They definitely like, people always ask me in my interviews over the years if I was mad at my mom. I was never mad at my mom, but I don't know how my mom said, okay, I'll take this unit 114 Jamestown Crescent, or I'll take this unit at 17 Shoreham Court. I don't know how, because me as a mom right now, I know that if I go out there and I moved my son to that area, I already know I would have had 6 baby daddies. I would have had, I don't know. I just would have known that. You know what I'm saying? It like, so I feel like I was definitely I became a product of my environment. Anything that men did, I wanted to do stronger. I've been hiding guns in my house since I was 9 years old. So I started to love guns. I love those sounds of gunshots. Like, I remember my best friend that died, rest in peace, Andre. He used to tell me that. He used to sniff Jane and Finch. Me and him used to do it and say, holy, it smells so nice, yo. And it was blood and death we're smelling, man, and glorifying. So, like, yo, I've been there. I done that. You know what I'm saying? I even been there where I worked for housing, you know what I'm saying, for 10 years. I worked at Warden Woods Community Center. I worked at agencies left and right because everybody wanted to hire me. I was this ex-gangster girl that could have pulled in the youths. And I did what you did, Kevin. I used to go in the hood. I used to go in the lane. I used to go everywhere and work. And I used to tell people I was like a resource drug dealer. You know what I'm saying? I used to just photocopy, though. I used to use up their paper, photocopy extra. I don't care if you guys are watching from housing. I used to photocopy. I use enough of your paper and just tuck it in and get people transfers and going hard. And trust me, the only problem with me though, there was no unity, man. Different organizations weren't working together. So that's why I left the sector completely. You know what I'm saying? But kudos to you still. I rate you. I rate you to Zapp. I rate you too. I rate anybody that's trying to make a change in the community right now, because it's necessary. And yeah, I'm done talking now.
Yeah, no, thank you, Latoya, for that. It's interesting, right? Because the anger is there. The anger is there, and you're passionate. No, I get that. I am a passionate person as well, so I feel it. I also feel the anger underneath there. And even though it's some things that have happened years ago, there's still parts of you that may be upset and angry. So I know, Roberto, you speak about anger, about you having to learn how to control your anger. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All the contrary to a lot of the stories I have been listening.
Yeah. We got
Can you hear me? To all the stories I've been listening, my anger came in different. It was, yes, from being abandoned by my mother, but also like a lot of other factors in my life. I was bullied a lot. I was picked on a lot. I was beat up a lot because I was skinny. I'm skinny. I've always been skinny. You know, it didn't take much to knock me down. So I realized that the more tattoos I got, the more intimidating I looked. So the bad guys, they started gravitating more to me, and instead of picking on me. Um, so I went along with that. You know, started getting acceptance from the wrong side more than getting picked on, and that for me was safer. I always wanted to be a musician, so I was always known as this clever guy with words or funny. So that saved me, and at the same time got my butt kicked a lot for being a smart mouth. But I music ultimately is what saved me and what controlled my anger. And having a kid, having my daughter, obviously, I didn't want to go to jail anymore. I didn't want to, and just like the last time I was in jail, I was just treated so horribly that it just I just never want to see that place. And like the gentleman was saying before, that prisons teach you, they're a school. Well, to me, it taught me how to stay out of it by all the corruption or mistreatment that I witnessed, that I went through while incarcerated. At the same time, I learned how to stay out of prison. And so that's what it did for me, being in jail here. And I don't know, um, I like the view from the window here instead of the
Right.
prison bars.
Yeah.
So that's how, like, how do I put it? I guess what I know the circumstances are going to be to my angry actions are what help me control my actions. That's the best answer I can give
Yeah.
you. That's what helps me stay. It's a bit frustrating at times, and you constantly find yourself putting your tail between your legs. But it's fight against the system. I end up in prison. If I just go along with it and just nod, I kind of stay free.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's kind of the way I've made it work for me personally.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Someone, there's a question. Tofik, you're telling me there's a question. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question from Partners of Keepsix, Black Farmers Market. It says, I would like to ask a question. What have we ever done? What have we ever done to the system? Why they hate us so much? This is for the people who work in the justice system. Does anyone want to answer this question?
I will.
You will? Okay, I was thinking
Yeah.
about
So what
you,
it
Richard.
is
Yeah.
we're talking about the attitude of the people that are in the system, looking at the people who work in the system. So I have relatives that are guards, prison guards right now, and I have relatives that are cops right now as we speak. Some of them are black, some of them are white. I don't hate them unless they become racist or abusive. And once they become racist or abusive, I hate them. The whole thing is that when you're in the system, if one guy kicks you, we'll say like in Natacha's case or Latoya's case rather, if one person abuses you, breaks your arm or does something like that, then you look at them all as the same because they're in a uniform. So it's a Pavlovian response to the uniform and not the individual. So the thing is you have to teach yourself not to hate the whole. Well, you hate the individuals in the whole, not the whole per se, but the whole system. And I think that's the key. So hate becomes developed, and when you go in, you don't hate. You just when you go in, you think you screwed up and you want to get treated, and then all of a sudden, within a few weeks, you learn to hate because there's hate all around you. It's a system predicated on hate and control of that hate and those persons. So prisons were built in Canada to lock up Indigenous people. That's the RCMP were invented for that reason. And it's that same now. Their mandate and their goal is to lock up anyone in society who they think is going to upturn the status quo. And the status quo is white privilege. That's it. So once you know that, then you could use things to mitigate the angst and the pains and the turmoil that you're going through because you know that that's the game they're playing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, because that's exactly where I was going. I was going systemic racism, but you answer that. Nzappa, I want to come to you because you and I spoke about
Yes.
Black and Indigenous youth. So I think
Right.
this picks up right there, right? We spoke about Black Indigenous youth, how they face a disproportionate amount of systemic racism, especially within the
Right.
youth shelter system. Can you talk about that?
Okay, so I would say that just like in whole, overall in our society, we know that Blacks and people of color, specifically Black and Indigenous youth, they experience a preconceived notion. right? Just like in the school system, just like me, just walking down the street. There's a preconceived notion if you walk into a department store, who's more likely to do something that's wrong and who's more likely to be doing something that's like law-abiding and what have you. So inside the shelter system, I just want to touch on what some of the gentlemen were speaking about earlier in terms of the trust factor. What I've observed in the youth shelter system is that there's two tiers when it comes to the Black youth when they see a Black worker. One is the aspect, are you like an Uncle Tom? Are you like a sellout? Because sometimes they have certain biases that go towards those youth, and they'll be looking towards certain Black employees for assistance. And if you have to go against the grain. So for example, if this person got discharged, okay, this individual, but another individual didn't get discharged for the exact same offense, and you weren't working that shift, they're gonna be like, well, how come you didn't step up? How come you didn't say anything? And you're not even aware of these certain situations. And then you'll also have the other aspect where you can bond with them. They'll look to you as a mentor because I share within reason some of my past with some of them, and they'll come to you and they're like an ally force because they know how to work the system and how should I say it, everything more cohesively gel together within the residents and be representative. I always say that you're a role model for the other youth. So they don't want to make my job harder. They want to make brother man's job harder, right? So these are the things that we see that that go through. And I'll give you one example. There's this one youth, and he came with his girlfriend. They were like a couple, and already with his aesthetics, he had locks, you know, dark skin, very street oriented in aesthetics, and he shared with me. He goes, my girlfriend is very abusive towards me, but everyone thinks that I'm the bad guy. And the way he's like treated like he's a thug, he's treated a certain way. And I've seen it myself. So therefore I actually took him under my wing and we spoke in the office a few times. And a couple of incidences have actually occurred where she was verbally abusive, even borderline physical with him outside of the youth shelter, and complete strangers walking by witnessing this and other staff, and they automatically penalized him to the point where almost a fist fight actually broke out, and she's begging the stranger, no, it's me, it's me, it's me, it's me. So the reason why I'm sharing this right now is because these are the, as I said, the preconceived, preconceptions that are happening when it comes to Black youth inside the youth shelter system. I'm not saying everyone is exactly like that, but I guarantee you, every youth that's Black inside the youth shelter system will be able to share with you an experience they have that's based off of race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know you want to keep on continuing with the whole shalom, right, but like with the youth, but no, but like seriously, but I've seen it where it's like and that one youth, like they actually ended up being discharged. They left on their own. He actually shared with me that another staff actually apologized to him and said, you know what? When you first came, I used to think of you like this. I used to assume that you were like that.
Right.
And
right.
I can do nothing but empathize with that, because had you been put in that situation yourself, I already know what it's like for people to presume and have prejudice towards me. So how much more so is it going to be more bearing on youth? Especially, as I said before earlier, they want to blame everything on youth in society, have no real resources for them. They'll sooner have things for single mothers, seniors, and whatnot. But when it comes to youth, especially when they're homeless, they're literally unthought of. They're not even thought of. And when they are thought of, it's not the best thoughts that are put towards them. So these are the certain factors to bring it back to what Black and Indigenous youth face when they're inside the shelter system.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Kevin, I want to move to you to kind of stay within the same range of topic, because when we spoke, you stated that CAMH, we know, is a large organization, and even being a large Canadian organization, not very well versed in anti-Black racism. How has this impacted your ability to work with different departments in terms of developing that plan of care?
Thanks for that. So yeah, I think it just in general, you know, no matter where we work, it's part of the system, right? We can find better pockets or pockets that we might feel that we can do the work that we want to do. but we're all part of the system in one way or another, right? And I think we have to remember that the system was not designed for us, right? Many of these programs that we have, we're trying to fit them into an already existing system, right? But, we weren't necessarily on the top of the priority list when these programs were designed, right? So having said that, it's not CAMH in it specific, but the system in general, all the places where, the various systems that Black youth, Black people, racialized people, marginalized people in general experience, it wasn't designed for them, right? So the question is, how can we, understanding that, how do we navigate the system, right? I wish I was able to create a new system. I know that's not, as an individual, it's not something I'm able to do, right? So it's about how can I be strategic in that? How can I help advocate? How can I change what I'm doing on an individual level that acknowledges that you're right? And I kind of want to loop that back to a lot of the things I've been hearing about anger, right? And I think when we talk about, any of us who've kind of been in any type of field working with people, we always stress about validating feelings, right? But for some reason, when we talk about anger, every program is talking about anger management. How do you manage it? But who's talking about, you have a right to be angry, right? How many programs are telling you, you know what, you're angry and you're right, you should be angry, right? That doesn't mean now you can go act on that anger, but that feeling is valid, right? And now the question is, what are you going to do with that? And understanding that if you do this, this is going to get you in this type of trouble, right? There's not many programs that will take that type of approach, right? It's this person's angry, they did this, they need to be out. They need to be put here. It's not, you know what? You're right. That shouldn't have happened to you. You should be angry, right? But if you do this, it's going to make the situation worse, right? So I think just shifting our perspective, even on the individual level, and helping to also support the system to say, you know what? This happened, but did you ever think of it from this perspective, right? Like, what do you think this person's seeing when, they came here and you didn't let them into this program, right? Like, how is it explained to them, right? Because this could have been the 10th time they've tried to get help, and this might be the last time, right? We don't necessarily know that unless we kind of take a step back to kind of really see what's going on. So, sometimes on the system side, people just see anger. They see someone who doesn't care, who's aggressive, who's a criminal, who's bad, right? None of us are born any of those things, right? We learn that those are all learned behaviors, right? And that we learn that through trying to interact with the system, and the door consistently gets slammed in our face, right? And to a point where we say, you know what? I'm tired of trying, right? Let me try something else, right? The problem is sometimes those things that we try make the situation even worse, right? But if you're not in a place where you have someone who can interact with you to explain that, it's a vicious cycle, this anger, right? And there's so many things around us that are going to keep making us feel like that. It's almost like we're set up for failure unless we get that type of support.
Yeah. Kevin, thank you for that, because it's so true. We are taught not to feel the bad feelings. We're taught to do away with these bad feelings, only to feel the good feelings. We are not taught that we need to make space for all of those feelings to be validated, to have space, to be seen. Because these feelings of anger, they have a place, they have a root. It's understanding what that root is, what that foundation is, other than just throwing it away. Right. So thank you so much for sharing that and for mentioning that. Asante, I want to come to you because you have been working really hard on an initiative called the Reach Out Response Network. Can you share with us what that is?
Yeah, thank you. It's an advocacy organization, and really what we're focused on right now is essentially making it so that when someone is in a mental health crisis, the first people who show up are not the police, and instead are mental health workers. We're looking at hopefully getting peer workers, but also having those people paired with another mental health worker of some sort. We're still doing a lot of consultation and figuring out what the people are asking for, what makes the most sense for communities. But that's essentially the crux of it. Why are we doing this? Well, earlier today, during this broadcast, on the bottom there was a bunch of names of lives lost.
Sophie, can you put that up again, please?
And if you look at those names, by and large, those are Black and Indigenous folks. Or other people of color, right? crisis, or whether or not we're actually in a crisis. But once police get involved, I mean, bad things happen, right? If we're in a, we've been talking about preconceived notions. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm in a crisis, and if someone is calling the authorities because someone's in a crisis, they're not going to be like meek and quiet and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's going to be more of a situation where people are going to be louder, boisterous, or hard to bring down or what have you. So now if you're a black person or an indigenous person and there's already these preconceived notions about you, the police show up, they're not seeing a crisis. They're not seeing this person, needs support and de-escalation. They're seeing this person's a threat, right? And that's how the situation is going to be approached. And I mean, sometimes people die and in sometimes mysterious ways and sometimes not mysterious ways. Sometimes people are unlawfully harmed, or they're given physical and chemical restraints that were not required, and those sorts of things. So for us, what we're really trying to do is just minimize the incidence of all that stuff, because obviously, death is, there's a lot of finality in that. But even if you don't die, the trauma that leaves people with, sometimes is something that people are then, have to deal with for the rest of their life, right? Or it just further, engenders that distrust in the system. It becomes another way in which, I wouldn't say victimized, another way in which the system has inflicted violence against us. You know what I mean? So for me, it's I know that if you were to look publicly at the organization in the face of it, and all of this stuff, of course, the issue is being spoken about in generalities as if it because it affects all of us. But for myself personally, my motivation is such that black and brown bodies continue to get harmed. And realistically, I'm tired of seeing it. And if I could do something to make sure that the likelihood of that happening is as close to zero as possible, then for me it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to stick with you for a second, because can you speak to the areas that you feel that are lacking within the justice system in terms of mental health? Because I know with the Reach Out Response Net, where you and your team have been doing a lot of work. So what do you think is lacking within the justice system in terms of mental health?
Everything. Just even in the way that we conceptualize crime is, we think of, if someone does a crime, that person is a bad person. If that person goes to jail, that person is a bad person. No one says that person has trauma. No one says that person didn't, was dealing with neglect. No one says that person, has, someone, in their family did something to them that they shouldn't have done. No one's looking at these, preceding factors that put people on a path to go in that direction, where, people don't have a hope, or, the sense of belonging comes from a place where maybe it's can lead to self-destructive actions, right? So for me, it's like, I am like really anti-criminalization. I don't even like the word criminal, right? Because when you say criminal, someone's a criminal, you have branded that person for life. And there ain't nobody on this panel who can say they ain't never did nothing bad before. I can't come up here and say I've never done a crime before. I can't say I haven't sold drugs before. Obviously I wasn't heavily involved, but it's something I've done. I just wasn't caught, right? But then I got to go to university, and I do a TED talk, and people look at me a particular way because I didn't get caught for the things that I did. If I did get caught, all of a sudden, I'm not Asante Haughton, the TED talk guy. I'm a criminal, right? So for me, it's about rehabilitation. I think that should be our approach, and the lens through which we look through. You know what I mean? Because it brings me back to I was in grade 5, and I remember being in a therapy group in grade 5. Because my mom put me in the group because I guess, I don't know, dealing with my father not being around, as struggling with that. So she put me in this therapy group at school, right? And I showed up to the therapy group, and it was me and like all the school bullies in the therapy group. And then they started telling their stories about, yo, my dad come home and punch me in the face. Like, and these are like 11-year-old kids, you know what I mean? And these things, and these guys are breaking down, like crying, like bawling. And I'm in there looking around like, holy shit, like, it's what these guys are dealing with, right? So, I mean, and then, these are the same guys who, they turn 14, 15, 16, and, they're in the system, right? So when we think about, like, mental health and justice, I think we really have to start unraveling it, right? I mean, no one goes out there when they're a kid and says, I want to be a person who, hurts other people or causes harm. No, you know what I'm saying? No one does that. And I mean, the large majority of people who engage in that stuff, I mean, whether in the moment or right after or reflecting on it, years later, no one's proud of that. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, and people don't really look at the fact that, and I didn't really get this when I was growing up, because, you're in an environment and it becomes normalized for you, right? It was when I left my environment and started interacting with people who did not grow up poor and didn't grow up in the projects, where I really realized, that like there's like a collective depression that just exists within, community housing. Right. So you see a man on the block and like, he's smoking out there, he's drinking out there, like that's coming from someplace. You know what I mean? And we really need to look at that. So, what for me, it's like if someone ends up in the justice system, like that's I see it as that's someone who has gone through something in their life that they need healing from. So instead of rejecting that person and pushing them outside of society as far as we can, because that's what we do, we ostracize people who have, been arrested and, went to jail for something. For me, I'm like, can we do the opposite and bring those people in and, really work on those wounds that are most likely a part of the history for that person?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's interesting because as you were speaking, I'm watching everyone in the panel. I think what you said has impacted everybody in terms of, for me, it was really you saying that collective wound. And there's so much truth to that there is this collective wound that even if we don't recognize that we're going through, that it's there. So it's about being able to understand what that is, being able to find that validation of who we are and to be able to move forward. And I don't think that the justice system is not set up that way. It says it's about rehabilitation, but we know that's not fact. That's not true. Look, Richard is telling us about how it's been 30 plus years trying to find mental health help up to a couple of months ago and still not given the help that you are requesting. So there's a problem there. Right? People talk about the criminal justice system as it wasn't set up for us, for Black, Brown, Indigenous folks. And we know that if you go back through history, as Richard, you spoke about this during this panel, right? There is a fundamental problem that needs to be unpacked and then put back together. And I think us sitting here having this conversation of how the justice system has impacted those of us who work on the community level and those of us who are going through our own mental health struggles, this is showing that there is a problem there. And we need to be having these conversations more and more and more to normalize it so that something can be done. Roberto, I want to come to you. Did you understand how you were or how mental health impacts you? That's a big question.
Can you
Yeah. I know that. So I'll back up a bit because you talk about how music plays a big role in your life. Maybe we'll start there and unpack it from there. So what's the role that music plays for you in your life?
it's like that voice inside me that is afraid to say what it wants to say. I use my music to say what I really want to say. You know, the actual Roberto Fernandez is afraid to say 50% of the stuff X would say out loud, you know. So it's not that I have a borderline personality disorder or anything like that, but I do. There is a difference between me, this guy that's talking to you right now, and the artist that I am. You know, he's like my shield. He protects me from all the bad stuff. You know.
Why
You
do you
know.
think you even needed to put up the shield? Right? Because a lot of us have it. A lot of us have a shield, whether we call it a mask or avoidance or whatever. A lot of us have the shield. So for you, why is it important for you to have a Keith as your kind of like an alter ego?
Well, like I said, growing up in well, I didn't grow up in Jane and Finch or any place like that, but I grew up in like in between South America and here, Venezuela, like third world barrios, you know, where your floor is dirt and your roof is sing. You know what I mean? Your alarm clock are the bullets in the morning. That's just the way it is. That's where I grew up, and um, sorry, I
Yeah,
lost
it's
track
okay.
there. What
These are hard
why I needed to
conversations.
create it because is when I got all these tattoos and I started hanging out with certain people that made me look tougher, and then they weren't around. I still had to look tough by myself, you know, like they weren't there 24/7 to protect me all the time. So I had to create this tough guy, this loudmouth guy, this like I've put myself in situations where I had such a loud mouth one time, or well, many times, but I started speaking out to this guy and, you know, being all tough and this. And, you know, at the time, the tattoo on my face was teardrops. Like I had teardrops on my face from my dead brothers. But I would pretend at times when necessary that the teardrops meant something else and would say things like, don't make me make you another teardrop on my face while I'm all alone and I have no gun or nothing, you know. And I saved myself by acting like I did have a gun and said things along the line. Do you think that if I wasn't carrying something, I'd be acting this stuff all by myself? Like, come on, think about it. Like, I had to create this character that protected the real me, the vulnerable me. You know that. So that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the best way to answer that.
No, you did an excellent job of answering. Thank you. Thank you for that. I know these are hard conversations, and all of you have been very brave to even come on this platform and be so open and honest and vulnerable. So I thank all of you for being here and having these conversations. I wanted to ask Latoya the next question. I'm hoping that she will pop back on. So I will move on and figure out. Her question was great too because it was connecting everybody. um, Maybe Zappa, I'll go to you because you work with a lot of youth, right? And Roberto
Hmm.
spoke about how he created like an alter ego as a way to protect himself. Is this something that you commonly see in the youth that you work with?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Oh, without, I was actually thinking that literally when he was sharing, and it's to the point where it's actually comedic to some degree when we know how certain youth are, but when the big chaos. I'll tell you, share this right now. So a lot of we normally house like 40 youth in the residence, and due to COVID, there's been some movements to like hotels, where the majority of the youth that reside inside the shelter, that's where they're at now. And within the shelter now, we have like around 13 spaces. So for social distancing, when there's normally housing 4 youth per room, there's only 1 youth inside there. And the youth that we would see, who are like the top dogs, so to speak, the ones who are running the streets, who are up inside there, the other youth will be like, I don't know, they'll be like ornaments sitting there quiet in the corner. These are the top dogs. You know, it's almost like a jail range, so to speak, right? And but when those top dogs are not there, you'd be amazed at where this gung-ho gumption, I'm the badass, right, kind of person, because they know what to emulate and they know which ones that they can push around. And often at times within the youth shelter system, when you see those who do suffer from mental illness, as long as they're not like really, really aggressive, those who are like silent and whatnot, they'll usually be the ones that are punked on. And so we do see it happen, as Roberto shared too, when it comes to someone coming from Niagara Falls, say, they don't know what it's like, the big inner city. And I used to see this a lot as a doorman. People coming to the big city of Toronto, the youth shelter is the same thing. And they put on this persona, like they think this is what they have to act or they want to act, but they realize we don't carry on them ways. We don't. So you just see more transparent the more you put on this new alter ego, so to speak. So yes, I do see that quite often. Usually it will tone down once they open up with their care coordinator and they start to see how things are. But usually, if they're part of if they've been growing up in the system, if they've actually been part of like, the juvenile system, CAS, they often at times, they're the real deal. They're the real deal. But when you see a lot of them who are traveling and they come from small towns or whatnot, you'll often see that type of alter ego be manifested.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Latoya, I'm glad that you came back because I wanted to piggyback off Roberto was saying. You have similar experiences in terms where you talk about where you had to learn to cope and music was your way to cope. Can you tell us how music was your way to cope and how it really, I guess, saved you or got you to a better place?
It just inspired me because I remember when I was in Vanier, I entered a poetry contest. I finished most of my high school credits in jail. And I entered this contest in America. And if you won, they were going to publish it in this book. And it was this big, big deal. So at school, and the English teacher was like, "You're so good at English." So I just changed up one of my rap lyrics and I entered it and I won from jail. So it kind of pushed me and inspired me to do it outside. And it was kind of therapeutic for me, to be honest. Like the guards would like literally make me sing for everybody, and they weren't even supposed to, but they just make me sit outside and just spit to people. I put them to sleep like that and stuff. So that's where it, like, I gained to like just express myself through music, because like, I don't know, that's just the best way. And through my arts period, because I'm also an actress, right, and a dancer. So it's like, just express it that way then, you know?
Yeah. So you also said, I doing my homework on all of you. I know that Latoya, you do a lot of community involvement and outreach programs here in Canada as well as in Jamaica. Can you share some of the stuff that you're doing?
Okay, so I have a lot of experience in community work. When I got hired in this sector, I worked at East Metro Youth Services. I like to shout out those organizations, by the way. Also, I worked, Richard, where your family is, at Alexander Park. I remember, I think, when your uncle passed away. Like, I worked at numerous places. And tell me the question again. What's the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that you do a lot of community outreach programs. So just tell us
so
about
how was
your
I doing
involvement.
it? Yeah.
And I know here
so
as
I
well
still
as
sit on panels and stuff. To be honest with you, I buried my brother in 2012, my baby brother, and I just had this guilt trip that I brought working in communities home with me, because I used to go so hard for certain youths. Like, sometimes I'd have to go to co-workers' houses to speak to their youths that were like on house arrest and like only I knew. Like, I don't know. It was a need out there, so I had to do what I had to do. For instance, let me give you a scenario. One time I had to work in the lane. So I'm from up top. I'm from Shoreham, and I had to work in the lane. And there was a murder there, and it was like friction, and I still did it. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't even know how I handled to do it because my brother had just been murdered. But I decided that obviously it wasn't my fault. You know what I'm saying? Like sort of like you, Roberto. Like I grew up with family issues too. You know what I'm saying? My father was incarcerated for 18 years. My mom tried her best, but we had stepfathers. I went through all that. You know what I'm saying? I remember me and my sisters were just talking about like people think it's always physical. I remember my stepfather like making us brush our teeth with soap. You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't like us for long years. So like there's different things that you can do. I mean, different things that you go through, but you still have to give back. So I travel a lot to Jamaica. That's where I record. That's where my father lives. So I decided like when I'm down there, I already do little things. Like I already bring little bags of condoms, no frill bags of condoms. And I'll like donate money. I'll put people through makeup school or different things. But I'm like, why don't I just try to pull together some people to like, you know, because people are always saying that they'll help for different things if I need them, because I've always been there for certain organizations and stuff. So like, I don't know, like right now I'm coming together to get some packages because the other day I needed to go to the river because I was in an accident, and these little boys, they killed up themselves to bring me to the river, and they didn't ask me for no money, no nothing. I gave them money. So now when we were walking back to leave now, I said to them, "Where's you guys' house?" And they said, "Oh, we passed it already." But the house that we passed, if that was their house, ladies and gentlemen, I've never even seen a house in this condition in Jamaica because it has no roof, and it was raining those times. So it brought me to tears. I immediately cried, and I asked my fans to like help me. I go, I don't even ask you guys for nothing. Never. I never say, oh, you know, just please. And people stepped up. They stepped up to give me money, to give me gift cards, to get clothes for them. So I'm pulling together my resources now, and I just want to take it wherever I go. You know what I'm saying? I have a fan base in Antigua too. I give back there. That's why I have a high respect for you guys. Just sitting down, I'm not gonna lie, I never used to be able to see 3 Black workers at one time because it wasn't like that back in the day when I started out as a social worker. I'm not gonna bait out my age, but yeah, you know, like, so kudos to everybody that's giving back. I'm doing it finally again now too. But for now, I like sitting on panels and stuff like this because as you can see, it's more effective and people will sit down and really take us in, you know?
Yeah, of course. Of course. We have power in numbers and there's strength in numbers. And when we come together as a community to share our stories and to be able to show that there are people in the community doing the work, then we can connect to the community. Right? So we're all doing that here. Kevin, I wanted to ask you, because I know that you are a member of the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel for the Toronto Police Service Board. Can you speak on what is being done to better support the community when calling 911 for mental health help?
Sure. So maybe I'll first start in terms of how I even got involved with that. I think that's a new panel, I believe in 2019, late 2019, that it was put together. And I think it's put together based on a number of reasons. As we know, in terms of the climate, in terms of black bodies and police and interactions in this tension, right? So I think that's played into a lot of high-profile cases as well, not just Black people, but many populations as well. But in terms of interactions, I think we've seen, especially over the last year or so, a lot of interactions in terms of people in crisis with the police in some high-profile cases, whether here in Toronto or globally. So there used to be a mental health subcommittee with the Toronto Police Service Board that had done some work to really identify that mental health needs to be at the forefront of the service, because especially how the system is set up now, let's face it, we can all sit here and talk about, police responding to people in crisis, but the way the system is set up right now, that's the body that's there to do it, right? So it's about, well, how can we make things better, right? Understanding that
Right.
police aren't clinicians, right? So we can sit and we can train and we can talk, but it's not that the person coming to respond to someone in crisis has the background of a psychologist or a social worker, so it's understanding that, what I think Asante was talking about as well. Well, so maybe they're not best positioned to do that, right? So I think that's what kind of why the panel was born. There actually was a mental health and addiction strategy that they have just recently put out within the last 6 months, I believe it was published publicly. So I would encourage everyone to go look at that if you want to see specifically actions that they're looking to do now. What I can say is that one of the big pieces of that, I'm not sure if people know, is what they call mobile crisis intervention teams, where it's a team where they have a police partnered with a nurse to respond to various calls from persons in crisis throughout the city, right? I think there's a lot of talk now in terms of, well, how can we expand things like that? How can we make things more accessible? Training in general, right? Like understanding that everybody who works for the police should have training on anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-racism in general. And understanding how prejudice and bias sometimes might inform, whether unconsciously or not, your interactions and how that might be perceived on the other end. And understanding that you can't just separate mental health from life, right? Mental health is part of life.
Very much part.
These 10% of people focus on mental health, and we'll just continue doing our thing, right? No matter where you go, you're going to interact with people who experience mental health challenges, right? Even us on this panel, right? I don't think one of us can sit here and say that we've never experienced something in terms of struggles, right? It's a part of life. And
Exactly.
I think that we have to set up a system where when people need that help, they're met by people who also understand that, you're not here behaving in this way because you're wanting to cause a ruckus, right? You might need support. But what does that look like, right? Maybe when it's, other populations, sometimes people say, well, this is someone who needs help, right? If you go to half of these communities, half these things we see on the news, this shooting, all of these kids need help, right? But we're not looking at it from that perspective. We're looking at it from a criminality perspective.
Exactly.
Right? And that's getting help, right? So.
Yeah. No, thank you. And it's true. We are not looking at it in a perspective that is going to help do more prevention. We need to start looking at what is there, how can we apply what is there, the things that are in community, how can we apply that to the need that's there? And then how can we actually shift the idea of mental health being criminalized? How can we shift it to how can we prevent this? And as Kevin, you said, all of us on this panel have gone through traumatic situations, whether from their upbringing, from parents, from deaths of family members. How can we start putting things in community to address people where they are at? Because we know if you don't take care of things like grief and trauma and loneliness and anxiety and worry and all of that, then it could lead to other things. So we need to start meeting people where they're at so we can get more done within the community. Richard, I want to come to you before we start wrapping up. Richard, what do you think is missing in the community in terms of mental health availability? Because you've seen a lot. What's missing? Oh, you're on mute, Richard. You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I would say panelists, like all of us in the communities, more of us, has the greater effect. So what it is I said in the last sentence of my book, I think I said, I'd like to thank all the people that tried to help me in the community. And there were people like you, not many then, as we all attest to, but there was some who tried to help, and none of them could help me because my dream was different than their dream. And Asante, I think it was you that mentioned not everybody aspires to be bad. It's not true in my case. All those who followed me in grade 1, and that's when I started stealing. So the guys that started in grade 1 with me stealing and continued to hang with me until grade 9 and 10 ended up in the penitentiary. Everyone else that was able to be pulled away from me by people like you guys on the panel were saved from that. So I think you have to go to grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 to catch guys like me. And it takes panelists like yourself to see in to those communities that can see rehabilitative nature rather than punitive natures in people. And that's the thing. So when you say all those people and use that the derogatory term, all those people, and you classify them as that, can't be helped when you know that the majority of them in those communities aren't criminals. They don't aspire to be criminals. 90% aren't criminals. Jane and Finch, no different. Alexander Park, Regent Park, the majority of the people aren't criminals, but they're stigmatized that they all are. So it's hard to get the money to push into those communities. It's easier to get us, and we've been doing it. And I thank you all for that, going into those communities and giving our little 2 cents. And I think we have to do that. So our system's predicated on a punitive model, and all the governments around the world, there's only a few of them that use the rehabilitative model, have a greater success in their prison system and can divert more of that money towards mental health and drug interdiction programs rather than more guns, more steel, more towers, more police cars. So yeah, so it's I think it's us. I think the future has to be in our voices resonating and then expanding. So there's groups that are out there, lots of them that keep six one by one, and many more that you people are involved in, that they all do that, and I applaud all of them, because when I was younger, they didn't exist. However, they existed in a small nature with individuals like yourself trying to help me, and no one could, because I wanted to be El Capone. And I didn't care if I went to jail or died in a shootout with the cops. So the only thing that would have helped me was me. And I say that all the time. If a local gangster that I looked up to said to me, listen, kid, you got the brains, you got the balls, but you're in the wrong business, man. Divert your energy to something else, something different, because we don't want you here with us. There's a greater future for us with you sitting in a law office than sitting in a prison cell. That didn't happen. So I continue to do the things I did. Come and meet my little friend. You meant that. So people mimic the television. Come and meet my little friend. How many guys have you heard say that with a gun in their hand? Latoya, probably in your day, you probably heard a lot of guys after watching Scarface say that. So we tend to mimic our heroes on television and in the media, and we go in that route. So it takes those heroes to deter us from that path if it's that negative.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Richard. Richard, a number of people were asking you the name of your book. Can you tell everyone the name of your book, please?
It's Life, Crimes, and Hard Times of Richard Atkinson, leader of the Dirty Tricks Gang. I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah.
So I wrote that book, and it's primarily a historic book about our family and the community that I grew up in, Alexander Park community. Keep in mind that my father, a black man, is the only guy in North America who wrestled from the government a project housing, had it named after him because he co-opted
named
it
after Atkinson
while he
Co-op.
was living there. While he was living there, we're talking his move was in the early '90s when it was more gun shootings than there is now. So what he did as a community leader, and I got to throw that out there because he's got these big kahunas. He went up to crack dealers, crack houses, and said, "Listen, man, I know you guys since you were kids. You're going to have to stop the shit, man. You're hurting the community too bad." And they're like, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And behind them was 30, 40 community leaders with sticks and hockey sticks and stuff like that. And I put that in my book. And they said, "You can't shoot us all. We're more than you." And eventually they all left the neighborhood and went around the neighborhood, but they weren't no longer in Alexander Park. So it takes that type of mentality to rise up to protect your neighborhood. So he had an ulterior motive, and it was to protect his kids, my kids. I was in jail, my brother was in jail, and our kids were there. And it was to protect my daughters from criminal activity in the neighborhood. He stood up and took the fight to the people without fighting. That's the thing. You don't have to go smash people down. You don't have to go lock people up. You just have to go show them that if you think you're not us now, you'll eventually become us when you get out of jail. And it's true. So all those bad gangbangers that we know about coming out of jail now, the first thing they ask for is, how can I get back into the community? How can I fit back in to the community that I criminalized before? And that's where the mental health initiatives have to come from, so that then they could heal. And the thing is I was a leader, like Latoya was a leader. So if you can help and deter the leaders or put the leaders on another path, you save hundreds of other people just by doing that. And that's the key to the mental health. So I think I had major mental health issues without a doubt. And that's why I struck out at the government in the manner that which I did. And I think most of us that are in this criminal lifestyle, the thug life, have that disassociation, some kind of psychological disassociation to what is real. We live in an illusionary world, that we're the biggest, baddest things that ever walked the earth, and that no one could mess with us. And we're going to do what we want to do, regardless of the help you offer or the threat that you propose to me. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I know you have a podcast and I know you have a pottery shop, so definitely drop those. What is your podcast? Yep, go for it.
Flip Your Switch is my podcast. It's going to grow. I got so I said I started another gang. I told that to politicians, really. I started another gang. The police don't mind it. It's a gang of filmmakers this time. I got a bunch of black youths from Alexander Park area. We're now filming and we're doing the podcast, and we're connecting with other people and I run the pottery shop because I'm an artist. So I teach kids for free. I've been doing it 5 years now, the kids in Alexander Park or the surrounding area, ceramic arts. So I've been doing that. And I teach boxing. So I do that, amateur boxing and stuff. So that's what I do. But I did that in prison too, almost the same way. So so nothing's really changed in the last 50 years for me.
But now you have it out there in the community. So that's definitely from Richard. Richard's got a couple of community sports there. He's got boxing. He's got his podcast to reach people. He's got pottery shop. So that's there. Thank you for that.
And I'm connected. I've been around a long time. So, I'm the oldest person on this panel right now. Been around a long time. So I know a lot of people, and I direct people now that I've met you, and I'll be directing people to you when I hear, yeah, man, I need this kind of help or this kind of thing happens. And that's what we got to do.
That's what we have to do. 100%.
We can't be greedy in the methods that we use to help. We got to share the love.
100%. Thank you. I agree. Nzappa Zapp, tell us, what do you think? What are your thoughts on? What are your thoughts on the need to increase community mental health supports?
What are my thoughts on the need to increase it?
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? Yeah.
Well, I think primarily where it lies is killing the stigmas and stereotypes that surround it. It's not really a conversation. I think people already have a preconceived notion what entails with mental health. We don't hear much about it. We'll see like Bell has their little campaign, and we may know individuals who have mental illnesses, but what do we really know in public, as you're asking, about mental illness? We usually see someone who's actually suffering and we just pass them thinking, well, they're kind of crazy or they're cuckoo or what. We look at youth inside the shelter system, they just have behavioral problems, or even inside the academic system. So I think it has to become more of a norm in terms of creating awareness through all facets of our society. So whether it be in the academic system, whether it be inside the workplace, we're having all this racial sensitivity training and awareness, but when it comes to mental health, I think the same, it should be put through the same lens, and the same efforts and energy should be applied to that as well.
Right. Okay. Amazing. And I know you have also, is a podcast or radio show?
It's a radio show. It's a podcast when it comes to the audio. It's filmed live, and then we have it streamed live from the website, and you can find it on YouTube. So my show is called History's Mirror. Okay, I teach Afrocentric history through the Black diaspora, and you can catch it on thatchannel.com. You can check out my history page on Facebook. It's called History's Mirror. And I'm trying to build it up, people. It's been lacking. My Instagram, History's Mirror. And you can check me out, my personal one, flying_elbows at flying_elbows on IG as well.
Amazing. Great. Thank you. And what is one support that you know of in the community that you would like to share?
Myself, one support?
Yes. What support do you know? I know I'm putting you on the spot. Well, you have
Yeah.
your podcast, Sisters Mirror. Learning
Yeah.
about the history about the African diaspora is so important because then you know where you come from. So that's one of them. What else?
Okay, I got you, sister. All right, that's cool. I got you. Yeah, exactly. You must know. It's my saying. You must know your history to decrease the mystery. So,
Nice.
there we go.
Nice. All right, cool. All right, Latoya, I'm coming to you. What are your thoughts on the need to increase mental health supports in the community? What are your last
We just
thoughts?
gotta keep doing this, you know. But one thing I will say is I want to start seeing us also include the mothers and like people always want to hear my mom's perspective. She was in my documentary, but like we need to hear from some parents, like the things that we're just saying may be wrong with what they're going through. We need to actually hear from not even necessarily a mother that went through like a child that she lost physically, but like just a mother that struggled. You know what I'm saying? I want to hear from her, like what stopped you from getting the right supports in the school system? Like what, like, you know what I mean? Like I want to hear from a mother. I want to hear from a grandmother. I want to dig in the roots now. Like I love what we're tackling with mental health, but I really, really want to, like, because they were here first. They seen the change, right? And they know what it takes too, and they know what they went through. So I'd like to hear some input from them. But aside from that, hey, these panels, us going out there and doing the work still and being just available for youths, good work, man. So that's it. Just keep doing us. Just keep watching us grow, you know? Just keep growing. Growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, I love that. And you know exactly what you're talking about. You are talking about multi-generational trauma impact, right? So looking back at the mothers, at the grandmothers, the great-grandmothers, what happened and how has that been perpetuated
I want to hear
throughout
stories
the
from
family system? Yeah. Okay. And Latoya, what is one community support that you want to big up and shout out and let everyone know about?
You're gonna do that to me? You can't ask me one.
Yeah. So everyone get ready.
Concrete Roses, big up all who he's from the Atkinson area. Concrete Roses. Think Twice with Zia. Taibu. Come on, there's so many. Girls and Boys Club. Toronto Community Housing. There's so many supports out there. We just all need to unite and just conquer the streets.
Yes. And this is why I'm asking the question, because I get people come to me and say there's no supports out there, there's no mental health supports, and I'm like, there are so many, but the thing is we are all working in silos. We need to do this more and tell each other and share this information, because supports are there, but no one's going to be know about them if we don't share it. So this is why I'm asking everyone that question, right? So
That's true.
Yeah.
And Kevin, big up yourself, Kevin, because I know Sapacy. I remember when they were starting out. I used to sit on panels there too. So big up yourself for working there too.
Yeah. Kevin, I'm coming to you. Same question.
Okay. Latoya took a lot of the places to shout out. So she shouted out a lot of the good ones, which is good.
What are your...
I just kind of want to jump on to what she was saying too, and kind of tie that back to, I think, what Richard was saying before about getting these kids at grade 1, right? I think that's exactly what you're talking about. When we're looking at that multi-generational trauma, we're already experiencing that at early ages, right? Because it's really coming from the experiences of our parents and grandparents and that sort of thing. So I would echo that completely. We need to really be tapping into that expertise, really, because that's what it is, right? They're the experts of that experience and understanding what have some of the challenges been and how can we do better, right? How can we do this work better? So in terms of a shout out, I think I would add, there's so many youth outreach workers at various different, organizations. Sometimes it doesn't have to be anything in terms of, mental health. Not to say that you can't get that support, but just to have an alternative, right? There's things out there other than being on the street, right? Be connected with someone who can maybe show you some perspective, show you some other opportunities that you might not have had access to if you didn't have someone to help point you in that direction, right? So that's what I would say. Many community centers, libraries, what have you, you can get access to how you can connect with the youth outreach worker and just have something, just a change of scenery sometimes, right? Just to see something different from the environment that you're so used to can be so helpful, just to allow you to see a different life that maybe you never thought you would have access to, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Roberto, coming up to you. So, what are your last thoughts on the need to increase mental health, increase mental health community supports?
Well, I think same as what everybody said. More of us, more people that care more to help other people than just themselves. Um, I mean, I
Tell
can
us,
tell you
tell
all
us.
the things we need. So no, I'm just saying I could
Yeah.
tell you we can say all the things we need, but for them to be put
Right.
into place, now that's
Well,
something
you're
else,
doing
right?
some great work with
So yeah,
a young girl in the community, right? So there, right there, you're helping out the community. Yeah, go for it.
right.
Yes, yes,
Shit,
yes.
yeah.
Big up Sophia.
It's my home. It's my little
So
home.
tell us about the Super Sophia project.
So this is a little girl that battled leukemia from the age of 2 till 4. She's 10 years old now, a survivor. She has her Instagram. She's always posting these uplifting things, and um, I don't know. It just it helped. She helped me, like watching her stories, helped me go through a really rough time, helped me really get up. And actually, if I'm being fully honest, her story saved my life. Her story stopped me from putting a razor blade to my wrist.
I
So
love that.
she's my hero.
So the Super Sophia
So yeah,
Project.ca. You guys all check it out. That is one support in
yeah.
the community. Thank you, Roberto. Asante, I'm coming to you. So what are your last thoughts, Asante, on the need to increase mental health community supports?
I mean, obviously, we need more of them. But the point was saying, there are actually a lot of things that do exist, but we need to have more knowledge of those things that do exist as well. And also, like, more support in getting the youth to those places. One of the big challenges I think in youth work is who we reach, right? Because I did youth work I still work with youth technically, but I did like heavy youth work in Rexdale for 7 years, and I mean, we it's you could reach the kid who's kind of on the fence, but the kid was already gone. That's the kid that's hard to reach, right? And going back to what Richard was saying is like that kid's been gone for a long time. Like that kid comes onto my caseload when they're 14, but that kid was gone from time. Like so, it's about for me enriching that support from a very young age, and I think it goes to not. I look at mental health as like it's not just therapy for me. Mental health is learning your history. Mental health is having multiple generations of your family around to kind of consolidate who you are as a person. You know, all these things that everyone is talking about, right? For me, that all comprises mental health. The one thing I think as well that I always like to focus in this conversation is the impact of racism on mental health and the impact of racism on creating the structures that suspend you 26 times, or all of those things, right? So racism is a huge player in this conversation. When you're a black person, when you're indigenous, when you're Latino, whatever it is, you know, and that doesn't get, why is all the responsibility put on us,
Right.
right? I mean, obviously, we have some responsibility because this is like today is happening, but there's also a lot of responsibility on the system to just do better. And I think sometimes people feel like, oh, all these black people, indigenous people, whoever, they just want they want it easy. And it's not what I'm talking about. What I want is an opportunity for to move the obstacles out of the way so I can do my thing, right? So for me, I look at mental health through the perspective of improving life outcomes, but which comes from improving situations. So, and for us, racism is one of the things that is detrimental to our situation continually. So we work on that, I mean, the mental health outcomes improve significantly just by diminishing the amount of racism that is built into our society.
100%, 100%. And what's one support within the community that you want to shout out? Of course, yours, Reach Out Response Network, and another.
I'm also going to shout out another thing I connected to is the Community Healing Project. So, I mean, we work exclusively, well, actually, we're doing a thing with parents right now. So I'm actually doing a program for parents right now. But prior to that, we work exclusively with young people. And, I mean, the young people we're working with, by and large, come from the same communities where you turn on CP24 and the gunshots start going off. And our whole thing is to connect with the young people who are most, for lack of a better term, most vulnerable to being exposed to violence or being involved in violence. And we have a lot of success stories. I have a youth right now. I mean, the program done long time, from in the summer, but him and I, we still text. And he came into the program straight out of jail, and he didn't have any kind of belief in himself or what he could do. But now he's doing really well. You know what I mean? He's not the only one I know like that, right? The Community Healing Project, I think, is great. It's not like a therapy program, but the impact is therapeutic, if that makes sense, right?
100%.
It's a training program. It's a mentorship program. It's a peer-to-peer youth thing that we do. I just think the work that we do there is really powerful. The last thing I'll mention, probably the best resource we have is ourselves, right? And I say that in the sense of community is so important. Our world is suffering right now because of our inability to just come together for go down one direction. Like COVID is an example. People won't come together and just wear masks. You know what I mean? So it's like when we're separate from each other, things go wrong. So for me, it's about community and bringing people together. And I think, that is also a very important system of support in terms of improving our mental health. Isolation, whether physical or mental isolation or emotional isolation, is usually one of the things that you see in people who are experiencing, mental health challenges. So for me, it's about reducing that and creating more connection and creating more community.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to say something too. So, it's interesting because as we wrap up tonight and as we have these conversations, we definitely need to have more of these conversations, because I think historically, Black, Brown, Latinx individuals have all been impacted by colonialization, which has meant that we are all divided. And I think this is why when we speak of community, it's so hard to come together as a community because we have that ingrained DNA of being separated and divided. As a community, we need to really start to come together to take off these shackles of colonialization and recognize that even with us here, the 7 of us, we all know of many, many community resources. We need to be able to speak it with one another and share it with one another and hold each other accountable to say, hey, there's things out there. How can I help my resources to reach you? And how can you help your resources to reach someone else so that we can be in and of ourselves a community? So the community, I definitely working with Keep Six. Want to shout out Keep Six. Keep Six is doing many, many things. We have the empowerment to unlock the justice system once a month. We have our Facebook Lives Connect the Six every week, where the mandate is to connect the community one interview at a time. We have the Stop the Violence campaign that is going on I think it's in 2 weeks in December. There's many, many things going on. I want all of you guys listening, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being involved in this conversation. All of our panelists, thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor to sit here and have these conversations with you. It's also been an honor to Google all of you and see all the amazing work that you are doing. So I definitely appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here. And everyone, Thank you again. This is going to be up live. We're streaming live, but it's going to be on our YouTube channel and Facebook. So definitely share it. Tell a friend to tell a friend that this is what we're doing. And I want to wish everyone to have a really great night. I am Natasha Pennycooke. It's been an honor. Everyone, good night. Sending you love, peace, and blessings.
Thank you, Keep
Night.
Six.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody. Thank you, everyone.